I am 26 years old, and my fiancé, Mark, who is 30, had a sister named Becca. For the longest time, I thought she was the problem. She was the thorn in my side, the reason I always felt like an outsider in my own relationship. Mark and I were supposed to be a team, but whenever Becca was around, it felt like they were the team, and I was just the audience. She had a way of looking at me, a little smirk that never quite reached her eyes, that made me feel small and insignificant. She would make comments that sounded like jokes but felt like tiny, sharp needles. If I bought a new dress, she would say something like, "Oh, that is a brave choice." I could never pull that off. Mark would just laugh and squeeze my hand, as if her approval was a prize I was constantly failing to win. The real issue, the one that sat at the center of all our problems, was money. I had inherited a considerable amount from my grandparents when they passed away 2 years ago. It was not something I ever bragged about, but Mark knew. He knew everything. When we first met, he was charming and ambitious, talking about his family's small marketing firm and his big dreams to make it a success. He said it was struggling, a victim of a bad economy, but he had a vision to turn it all around. I believed him. I loved his passion. So when he first asked for a loan to cover payroll, I did not hesitate. It felt like I was investing in our future. I gave him the money, and he was so grateful. He promised to pay me back as soon as the company was back on its feet. That first loan turned into a second and then a third. It was always for the business. A new piece of equipment they desperately needed. An unexpected tax bill. A crucial client who was late on a payment. Each time, Mark would come to me with a look of deep worry on his face, and I would melt. I wanted to be the person who could solve his problems. I wanted to be his rock. Becca was a partner in the business, and she was always in the background of these conversations, her expression a mixture of pity and impatience. She made me feel like my money was the only valuable thing I brought to the table. One evening, she said, "Clara, you are so lucky you do not have to worry about real-world problems like we do." I just smiled, but the comment stung. It felt like she was erasing all my own hard work, my own career, and reducing me to a bank account. The pressure had been building for months. The wedding was approaching, and the costs were piling up. Mark wanted a huge, lavish affair. He said it was important for his family's reputation, for the business. He painted a picture of us as a power couple, and this wedding was supposed to be our grand debut. I found myself swept up in his vision, even though a quiet part of me just wanted a small ceremony with our closest friends. But I loved him, and I wanted to make him happy. So I agreed. I agreed to the expensive venue, the designer suits, the elaborate flower arrangements. And I knew, without him having to say it, that my inheritance would be covering the majority of it. He and Becca talked about the wedding plans constantly, often lapsing into inside jokes I did not understand. They would plan entire parts of the reception right in front of me, speaking as if I was not even there. I felt a growing sense of unease, a feeling that I was funding a party that I was not truly invited to. This strange dynamic was our normal. I would feel a prickle of resentment, then Mark would do something sweet, like bring me flowers or tell me how much he loved me, and I would push my doubts away. I would tell myself that I was being too sensitive, that Becca was just protective of her brother, and that the financial stress was making them both act strangely. I convinced myself that once we were married, everything would change. I would finally feel like a real part of the family. I would no longer be just Clara, the girlfriend with the deep pockets. I would be Clara, Mark's wife. That title felt like it would be a shield. It felt like it would finally give me the belonging I craved. I held on to that hope like a life raft, ignoring all the signs that the ship I was on was slowly, quietly sinking. I had no idea how close I was to hitting the iceberg. The truth was not just that the ship was sinking. The truth was that Mark and Becca were the ones drilling holes in the hull, all while smiling at me and telling me how beautiful the ocean looked. The day it all shattered started like any other Tuesday. I was working from home, finishing up a project report at my desk. Mark had left early for a meeting, kissing my forehead and telling me he would see me for dinner. The house was quiet except for the tapping of my keyboard. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was from Mark. I smiled, assuming it was a sweet message, a little check-in during his busy day. I opened the message. It was not a text. It was a voice memo. That was unusual for him. He was a texter through and through. I saw the little audio bar and the duration, 1 minute and 47 seconds. I pressed play, a sense of mild curiosity, my only emotion. The first thing I heard was not Mark's voice. It was Becca's laugh, high and sharp. "You are kidding me," she shrieked, her voice dripping with amusement. She actually agreed to pay for the platinum package? Then I heard Mark's voice, and my blood ran cold. He was laughing too, a deep, rumbling sound that I used to love. But this laugh was different. It was cruel. It was mocking. "Of course she did, Beck," he said, his voice smug. "She would agree to pay for a rocket to the moon if I told her it would look good on our wedding invitations. She is so desperate to be a part of this family. It is almost pathetic." My hand flew to my mouth. I could not breathe. This had to be a mistake. He must have sent this to me by accident. He meant to send it to Becca. My mind was reeling, but the recording continued, a relentless assault on everything I believed to be true. "So the final transfer for the new office space went through?" Becca asked, her tone shifting to business. "Her little loan for the cater deposit was more than enough to cover it." Mark chuckled again. "Yep. The new office is ours. And she has no idea. Thinks it all went to fancy cheese and tiny little hot dogs. The best part is, she feels so good about herself for helping out. It is like taking candy from a very, very naive baby." The word baby was laced with such contempt that I felt a physical wave of nausea wash over me. I was not his partner. I was not his beloved fiancé. I was a baby. I was a Mark. I could hear the sound of a car blinker in the background of the recording. He was driving. He was probably on his way back from that very meeting he had told me about. The thought of him walking through the door in a few hours, smiling and kissing me, made me want to be sick. "And what about after the wedding?" Becca's voice was sharp, practical. "Are you sure she will sign the papers to give you control of the main trust?" Mark's reply was the final, devastating blow. 100%, he said with chilling confidence. "She trusts me completely." After a few weeks of married life, a little champagne, a romantic speech about securing our future. "She will sign whatever I put in front of her. By this time next year, her grandparents' legacy will be our new beginning." The Harrison marketing empire, funded by the ever-so-generous Clara, he said my name with a kind of mocking pity, and then they both dissolved into laughter again as the voice memo clicked off. I sat there in complete silence, the echo of their laughter filling the empty room. My phone was still in my hand, feeling heavy and toxic. I stared at the screen, at the little audio file he had sent me. The evidence of his betrayal. My mind could not process it. It was like my brain had short-circuited. The man I was going to marry, the man I loved and trusted with my entire heart and future, was a monster. He was not just using me for my money. He was actively plotting to steal it all, with his sister as his gleeful accomplice. They saw me as a joke, a stepping stone, a fool. The shame was so intense it felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest, making it impossible to breathe. I felt my entire world, the world I had so carefully built around this man, crumble into dust around me. The love I felt for him evaporated in an instant, replaced by a cold, hard knot of fury and a terrifying, hollow emptiness. I must have sat there for an hour, just staring at the wall. My mind was a whirlwind of their words, playing on a loop. Pathetic, naive baby. She trusts me completely. Each phrase was a fresh stab of pain. I felt a tremor start in my hands, a deep, rattling shock that spread through my entire body. I stood up on shaky legs and walked to the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water. My reflection in the window was a stranger. A pale, wide-eyed woman on the verge of collapse. For a moment I wanted to shatter. I wanted to scream and cry and throw things. I wanted to call him and unleash all the rage and hurt that was boiling inside me. But then, a different feeling began to surface, pushing through the shock and the grief. It was a cold, quiet resolve. They thought I was a fool. They thought I was a naive baby. Fine. I would let them keep thinking that. I would let them believe their plan was working perfectly. And while they were laughing and plotting, I would be making a plan of my own. A plan to take back everything they had stolen from me and everything they were planning to steal. The shock was turning into strength. The heartbreak was turning into a weapon. They had made a very big mistake. They had underestimated me. And they had accidentally sent me the blueprint to their own destruction. That evening, when Mark came home, was the hardest performance of my life. I heard his keys in the door, and my heart started pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I took a deep breath, forcing a smile onto my face that felt brittle and fake. He walked in, looking pleased with himself, and dropped a kiss on my cheek. "Hey, babe," he said, his voice casual and light. "How was your day?" Every nerve in my body screamed at me to confront him, to play the memo, to watch his smug face crumble. But I held it in. My new plan required patience. It required me to become the best actress he had ever seen. "It was good," I said, my voice miraculously steady. "Just finished up that big report. I was thinking about what we could do for dinner. I had to keep everything normal. Any change in my behavior would tip him off." He wrapped his arms around my waist from behind as I stood at the counter, pretending to look up recipes. His touch, which usually felt like home, now felt like a violation. I had to fight the urge to flinch away. "I am so glad that project is done," he murmured into my hair. "You have been working so hard. You deserve a break." The hypocrisy was staggering. He was praising my work ethic while actively stealing the fruits of my family's labor. "I was thinking," he continued, his voice smooth and persuasive, "we should really book that photographer we liked. The one with the platinum package. I know it is a splurge, but these photos will last a lifetime. It is an investment in our memories." He was testing me. He was repeating the exact words from the voice memo. It took every ounce of my self-control not to react. I turned in his arms, forcing my smile to widen. "You are right," I said, my voice sounding sweet and agreeable even to my own ears. "Let's do it. We only get married once, right? It should be perfect." His face lit up with a triumphant grin. It was the look of a predator who had just successfully cornered its prey. He had no idea the prey was now laying a trap of its own. That night, I lay in bed next to him, pretending to be asleep. I listened to his steady breathing and felt a chilling distance from the man beside me. He was a stranger, and I was going to make sure he paid for what he had done. The next morning, I started my investigation. I needed more than just the voice memo. I needed cold, hard proof. I needed a paper trail that would be undeniable. While Mark was in the shower, I opened his laptop, my hands trembling slightly. His password was our anniversary. The irony was sickening. I went straight to his email and his bank statements. I had always trusted him with our finances, letting him manage the joint accounts where I would transfer money for our shared expenses. I had never felt the need to check up on him. Now I felt like a fool for my own blindness. I started opening files, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. What I found was worse than I had imagined. There were huge transfers from our joint account to another account I did not recognize. The descriptions were vague. Business investment, vendor payment. I quickly wrote down the account number. Then I found emails between him and Becca. They were coded, but not very cleverly. They talked about Project Legacy, which I knew was their code for my inheritance. There were spreadsheets detailing the money I had given them, with notes on how it had been allocated. Payroll for their struggling company was a tiny fraction of the expenses. The rest was funneled into things like market expansion, which I now suspected was a lie. I saw a receipt for a luxury watch, forwarded from Mark's personal email to Becca with the message, "A little bonus for our hardworking CEO. Courtesy of the Bank of Clara." I felt a fresh wave of rage. It was not just about the money. It was the sheer disrespect. The way they mocked me in private, treating my generosity as a weakness to be exploited. I took photos of the screen with my phone, my hands shaking so much the first few were blurry. I had to get it right. I documented everything. The emails, the bank transfers, the spreadsheets. I saved them to a secure cloud drive, then deleted the photos from my phone and cleared the browser history on his laptop. He would never know I had been there. As I closed the laptop, just moments before he came out of the bathroom, I felt a shift inside me. I was no longer just a victim. I was a detective, and I was building a case against the man I was supposed to marry. Later that day, I initiated a conversation with him, a test to see how he would react to a direct question about our finances. We were sitting on the couch, and I tried to sound casual. "Mark, I was thinking about all the wedding expenses," I began, watching his face carefully. "Maybe we should sit down and make a proper budget. I feel like things are getting a little out of control." He immediately became defensive. He put his arm around me, but it felt like a restraint. "Honey, do not worry about that stuff," he said, his tone condescendingly sweet. "I have got it all under control. You just focus on the fun parts, like picking out flowers. Let me handle the boring numbers." I pushed a little harder, pretending to be concerned. "I know, but it is a lot of money." "My money. I just want to make sure we are being smart about it." His smile tightened. The charm started to slip, revealing the coldness underneath. "Clara, are you saying you do not trust me?" he asked, his voice taking on a wounded tone. It was a classic manipulation tactic, turning my valid concern back on me to make me feel guilty. "Of course I trust you," I said quickly, playing my part. "I just want to be involved. We are a team, right?" He sighed, a dramatic, put-upon sound. "We are a team. And as the man of this team, I feel it is my responsibility to handle these pressures so you do not have to. I am protecting you from the stress." It was the most infuriating, patronizing thing he could have said.
He was not protecting me.
He was isolating me from my own money. I saw his strategy so clearly now. Make me feel cherished and protected, so I would willingly hand over control. "Okay," I said, letting my voice sound small and reassured. "You are right. I am sorry. I trust you," he smiled, his good humor restored. He had won the conversation. Or so he thought. He had no idea that all he had done was confirm my suspicions and strengthen my resolve. He had shown me his cards, and now I knew exactly how to play my hand. That night, I called my best friend, Sarah. She was the only person in the world I could trust with this. We had been friends since college, and she had a no-nonsense attitude that I desperately needed right now. I asked her to come over the next day, while Mark was at work. I could not talk about this over the phone. When she arrived, I made us tea, my hands still not quite steady. We sat at my kitchen table, and I just looked at her for a moment, the words getting stuck in my throat. She could tell something was terribly wrong. "Clara, what is it?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "You look like you have seen a ghost." I took a deep breath and said, "Worse. I have seen a monster." I told her everything. I started with the voice memo. I took out my phone and played it for her. I watched her face as she listened, her expression shifting from confusion to shock, and then to pure, unadulterated fury. When it was over, she just stared at me, speechless. "That snake," she finally whispered, her eyes blazing. That manipulative, greedy snake. Seeing her reaction validated my own. I was not being overly sensitive. I was not crazy. This was as bad as it felt. Then I showed her the photos I had taken from Mark's laptop. The bank statements, the emails, the spreadsheet titled Project Legacy. Sarah scrolled through them, her anger growing with each new piece of evidence. "Clara, this is not just him being a jerk," she said, her voice low and serious. "This is fraud. This is criminal." We spent the next hour talking, brainstorming. Sarah was practical and level-headed. "You cannot confront him yet," she said firmly. "They know you are emotional. They will twist it and say you are hysterical and misinterpreting everything. You need more. You need a professional." She was right. I was in over my head. I was dealing with calculated deception, and I needed an expert to help me navigate it. "You need a lawyer, Clara," Sarah said. "And not just any lawyer. You need a shark." She pulled out her phone and started looking up names, reading reviews of top financial litigation firms in the city. Her decisiveness was a balm to my frayed nerves. Having her on my side, having someone who believed me without question, made me feel like I could actually do this. By the time Sarah left, I had the name of a highly recommended lawyer, a woman named Catherine Shaw who specialized in financial fraud and asset recovery. I had a clear next step. My path was no longer just about surviving this betrayal. It was about fighting back. Sarah gave me a fierce hug before she left. "You are the strongest person I know," she said. "You are going to burn them to the ground." As I closed the door behind her, I felt a flicker of my old self returning. The doubt and fear were still there, but they were being overshadowed by a new, powerful feeling. I was not the naive baby Mark thought I was, and I was about to prove it to him in a way he would never forget. The next day, I made the call. My heart was pounding as I dialed the number for Catherine Shaw's law firm. I was given an appointment for a consultation the following afternoon. I told Mark I had a dentist appointment I had forgotten about. The ease with which the lie came to my lips scared me a little, but I knew it was necessary. When I walked into the law office, a sleek, modern space in a downtown skyscraper, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. This was the right place to be. Catherine Shaw was exactly as Sarah had described her. She was sharp, impeccably dressed, and had an air of confidence that was instantly reassuring. She did not waste time with small talk. She gestured for me to sit and said, "Tell me everything."
So I did.
I told her the whole story, from the first loan to the voice memo to the evidence I had found on Mark's laptop. I played the recording for her. She listened intently, her expression unreadable. When I was finished, she was silent for a long moment, her fingers steepled under her chin. "Well, Miss Collins," she said finally, her voice crisp and clear. "It appears your fiancé is not just a cad. He is a common thief, and a remarkably arrogant one at that." Hearing a legal professional state it so plainly was incredibly validating. "The voice memo is a gift," she continued. "It establishes intent in a way that is very difficult to refute. But your friend was right. We need more. We need to trace every single dollar you gave him." She laid out a plan. She recommended we hire a forensic accountant to conduct a thorough investigation of Mark's and his company's finances. "We need to build an airtight case before we make a move," she explained. "We will subpoena bank records, business filings, everything. We will create a complete picture of their fraudulent activities. When we confront them, we want to have them so cornered that they have no choice but to cooperate." She talked about options. "We could pursue criminal charges, a civil lawsuit, or use the threat of both to leverage a private settlement where he would repay everything he had taken. The choice will be yours," she said. "But first, we gather our ammunition." I felt a surge of empowerment. I was not just a victim anymore. I was a client. I had a professional on my side, a shark just like Sarah had said. I agreed to everything. I signed a retainer agreement and gave her the initial payment, using a credit card Mark knew nothing about. As I left her office, I felt like I was walking taller. The game had changed. I had my own team now, and we were about to go to war. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in deception. I lived a double life. In one life, I was the happy, trusting fiancé, excitedly planning a wedding. I went to cake tastings with Mark, discussed flower arrangements with his mother, and smiled through endless conversations about seating charts. I played my part so well that I sometimes scared myself. In my other life, I was secretly communicating with Catherine and the forensic accountant she had hired, a man named Mr. Henderson. I had quiet, coded phone calls in my car during my lunch break. I received encrypted emails with updates on their findings. Each new piece of information was another brick in the wall I was building around Mark and Becca. Mr. Henderson was methodical and brilliant. He uncovered the Shell Corporation. Mark's struggling marketing firm was barely operational. It had a handful of minor clients, but most of the money flowing through it was mine. The vast majority of the funds were being rerouted to another company, H&H Innovations, which stood for Harrison and Harrison. Mark and Becca were the sole owners. This was the company that was truly thriving. They were using my inheritance to build their own secret empire. Mr. Henderson found records of lavish expenses all paid for by H&H Innovations. There were first-class flights to Europe, stays at five-star hotels, designer clothes, expensive jewelry. There was even a down payment on a luxury condo in a ski resort town. They were living like royalty on my money, all while telling me they could barely make payroll. The forensic accountant's report painted a dark and detailed picture of their greed. He found that Becca had been systematically creating fake invoices from non-existent vendors, which Mark would then approve. He would then show me these fake invoices as proof that the business needed another injection of cash. I remembered one time he had come to me, looking so stressed, with an invoice for a server upgrade that cost $50,000. I had transferred the money without a second thought, feeling a pang of sympathy for his struggles. Mr. Henderson's report showed that the invoice was a complete fabrication. The money had been transferred directly to Becca's personal investment account the very next day. They were not just opportunistic. They were meticulous, organized criminals. One of the most sickening discoveries was about my own family. In the voice memo, Mark had mocked my family's modest background. Mr. Henderson found an email exchange between Mark and Becca from a few months prior. I had given Mark $10,000, telling him it was to help my parents with a new roof for their house. I had asked him to handle the transfer, as he was so much better with that stuff. The emails revealed that he had never sent the money to my parents. Instead, he and Becca had used it to buy front-row tickets to a concert and a ridiculously expensive dinner afterwards. Becca had written, "Cheers to the roof over our heads, paid for by the roof that will never be over theirs." She is just too easy. Reading that email felt like a physical blow. They had not just stolen from me. They had stolen from my parents. They had taken my act of love and twisted it into a cruel joke. That was the moment my desire for justice hardened into something much colder. It was no longer just about getting my money back. It was about making them feel the same humiliation they had so casually inflicted on me and my family. The emotional toll of this double life was immense. Some nights, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with all the lies and betrayals. I had to pretend to be in love with a man I now despised. I had to smile and laugh at his jokes, knowing he was laughing at me behind my back. There were moments when my mask almost slipped. One evening, we had dinner with his parents. His mother, a woman who had always been overly sweet to me, spent the entire meal praising her son. "Mark is such a good man," she said, beaming at him. "He works so hard to build a future for you both. You are so lucky to have him, Clara." I felt a bitter taste in my mouth. I wanted to scream. "Your son is a thief. He is building his future with stolen money." But I just smiled and nodded, murmuring, "I know. I am very lucky." I could feel Becca watching me from across the table, a smug little smile playing on her lips. She thought I was a fool, completely under their spell. That was exactly what I wanted her to think. The turning point for me, the moment I knew I was ready to end this, came during a conversation about the prenup. Catherine had advised me to bring it up. It was another test, a way to see how he would react. I chose my moment carefully one Sunday morning as we were having coffee. "Mark," I said, trying to sound a little hesitant. "My dad was asking if we were planning on getting a prenuptial agreement." I watched his face. For a split second, a flicker of panic crossed his eyes before he replaced it with a look of deep, theatrical hurt. "A prenup," he said, his voice wounded. "Clara, after everything we have been through, do you not trust me? I thought we were building a life together, not a business arrangement." It was the same tactic he had used before, but this time I was ready for it. "Of course I trust you," I said, my voice soft. "But my inheritance is family money. My parents and grandparents worked their whole lives for it. I just want to be responsible. It is not about us. It is about honoring them." I framed it as a matter of family duty, a concept I knew he would have to respect, at least on the surface. He was quiet for a long time, pretending to consider it. I knew what he was really thinking. A prenup could ruin his plan to gain control of my trust after the wedding. "All right," he said finally, with a heavy sigh. "If it will make you and your father feel better, then we can talk to a lawyer. But I want you to know this hurts, Clara. It really does." He was laying the guilt on thick, trying to make me feel bad for even suggesting it. But I felt nothing. His emotional manipulations had lost all their power over me. All I felt was a cold, clear certainty. The end was near. I had seen his panic. I knew his greatest fear was losing access to my money. And I was about to make that fear a reality. The final piece of the puzzle came from Mr. Henderson. It was the key artifact, the smoking gun that went beyond even the voice memo. He had managed to gain access to the full financials of H&H Innovations, the shell company. He discovered that they were in the final stages of a massive purchase. They were using my money as leverage to acquire a smaller, legitimate marketing firm, which they planned to merge with their company. The deal was set to close the week after our wedding. The final paperwork would require a huge capital injection, money Mark was planning to get from me as soon as I signed over control of my trust. This was their endgame. They were not just stealing from me to fund a lavish lifestyle. They were using my inheritance to build a legitimate business empire, effectively erasing the criminal origins of their wealth. They were going to launder my family's legacy into their own. Catherine and I had a long conference call. "This is it," she said, her voice grim but determined. "This is our leverage. They are on the verge of closing a deal that will make them millions, and they need your money to do it. We have them." We spent the next 2 hours crafting the final plan. It was no longer about a quiet settlement. It was about a public detonation. We would not just get my money back. We would blow up their deal, their reputations, and their entire future. The plan was simple, and it was brilliant. I would not bring up the prenup again. Instead, I would do the opposite. I would offer them exactly what they wanted. That evening, I set the stage. I made Mark his favorite dinner. I opened a bottle of expensive wine. I put on the music he loved. I was the perfect doting fiancé. After dinner, as we sat on the couch, I took his hand. I told him I had been doing a lot of thinking. "Mark," I said, my voice full of fake emotion, "I was so wrong to bring up the prenup.
It was selfish of me.
I trust you more than anyone in the world, and I want to prove it to you." His eyes lit up, a greedy, triumphant glint that he tried to hide. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice cautious but hopeful. "I mean, I want to invest in us," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "I want to invest in your business. All of it. I want to give you the capital you need to make all your dreams come true. I have been talking to a financial advisor, and he thinks it is a great idea. He just wants to have one meeting with us, with you and Becca, to go over the corporate structure before I sign the papers. It is just a formality." I named a figure, a huge, life-changing amount of money, far more than he had ever asked for before. It was the exact amount I knew they needed to close their acquisition deal. His reaction was everything I had hoped for. His jaw went slack with shock, and then his face broke into the widest, most genuine smile I had seen from him in months. He pulled me into a hug, lifting me off the ground. "Clara, baby, are you serious?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. This is everything. You have no idea what this means. We can finally close the big merger. Our future is set." He had taken the bait. He had confirmed everything without even realizing it. "Of course I am serious," I said, my voice muffled against a shoulder. "I love you. I want us to be a real team." "We will be," he promised, kissing me deeply. "You, me, and Beck. We are going to build an empire together." He was so blinded by his greed that he could not see the trap closing around him. The meeting was set for Friday afternoon in a neutral conference room that my financial advisor had booked. My advisor, of course, was Catherine Shaw. And she was not coming alone. She was bringing the entire, damning file compiled by Mr. Henderson. The final confrontation was set. The day of the meeting felt surreal. I woke up with a strange sense of calm. The anxiety and fear that had been my constant companions for weeks were gone, replaced by a steely resolve. I got dressed carefully, choosing a simple, professional dress. I wanted to look strong and composed. Mark was buzzing with excitement. He kept talking about all the things they would do once the merger was complete. He talked about buying a new house, a new car, taking a trip around the world. He was spending my money before he even had it. He had no idea he was walking into his own execution. We drove to the downtown office building together. Becca was waiting for us in the lobby, looking smug and impatient. "Finally," she said, tapping her foot. "Let's go get this done." I have a celebratory dinner reservation for us tonight. The three of us rode the elevator up in silence. I could feel their giddy anticipation. It was like watching a movie where I was the only one who knew the ending. We walked into the conference room. Catherine was already there, sitting at the head of a long, polished table. Mr. Henderson, the forensic accountant, was sitting beside her. They both stood up as we entered. "Mark, Becca," I said, my voice even. "This is Catherine Shaw, my advisor, and this is Mr. Henderson, her associate." Mark and Becca exchanged a confused look. They were clearly expecting some stuffy old man, not this sharp, powerful woman. But the promise of millions was enough to make them overlook it. They shook hands, their smiles wide and fake. "A pleasure to meet you," Mark said, oozing charm. "Clara has told us so much about her plans to invest. We are very excited to finalize the details." We all took our seats. Me on one side of the table, Mark and Becca on the other. Catherine and Mr. Henderson were at the head, like judges. Catherine opened a file in front of her. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice cool and professional. "Before we discuss the terms of Miss Collins's investment, there are a few financial discrepancies we need to address regarding the current state of Harrison Marketing and its associated entities." Mark's smile faltered. "Discrepancies?" he asked, his voice suddenly tight. "I am not sure what you mean." "Our books are in perfect order." Becca shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Yes," she added, her voice a little too high. "We run a very tight ship." "I am sure you do," Catherine said, her eyes like chips of ice. "Mr. Henderson, would you care to elaborate?" Mr. Henderson opened his own file. He began to speak in a calm, methodical voice, detailing the Shell Corporation, the fake invoices, the rerouted funds. He listed the dates and amounts of every fraudulent transaction. With each new detail, the color drained from Mark's and Becca's faces. Their confident exteriors began to crack, replaced by a growing panic. "This is ridiculous," Mark blustered, slamming his hand on the table. "Where did you get this information? You have no right to our private financial records. This is an outrage." "It is not an outrage, Mark," I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension in the room. They both turned to look at me, their eyes wide with disbelief. "It is the truth." Becca found her voice first. "Clara, what is this?" she demanded, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. "Why are you doing this?" "I thought you were on our side." I just looked at her. "I was always on your side," I said softly. "The problem is, you were never on mine." "This is all a misunderstanding," Mark said, turning his attention back to me, his voice shifting into a pleading tone. "Honey, these people are trying to poison you against me. Against us. You know me. You know I would never do anything to hurt you." He was trying to gaslight me, even now. But his words had no effect. I reached into my purse and took out my phone. I placed it on the table and pressed play. The room filled with the sound of Becca's high, sharp laugh. "You are kidding me," her recorded voice shrieked. She actually agreed to pay for the platinum package. The silence that followed was absolute. Mark and Becca froze, their faces a mask of pure horror. They stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. I let the entire 1 minute and 47 seconds play out. Every cruel word, every mocking laugh, every detail of their plan to defraud me echoed off the walls of the silent conference room. When it was over, I turned it off. I looked at Mark. The smug, confident man I had once loved was gone. In his place was a pale, sweating stranger, his eyes wide with terror. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Becca was the first to break. "It was a joke," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "We were just joking around, Clara. You cannot take that seriously." I turned my cold gaze on her. "A joke?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Was it a joke when you created a fake invoice for $50,000 and transferred my money to your personal account? Was it a joke when you stole the money I gave you for my parents' roof and spent it on concert tickets?" Her face crumpled. She had no answer. She just stared at me, her mouth hanging open. Mark finally found his voice. Clara, please, he begged, his voice cracking.
We can fix this.
I love you.
We can still get married. We can pay it all back.
Just please do not do this. The sight of him begging, so pathetic and desperate, filled me with nothing but contempt. You do not love me, I said, my voice hard as steel. You love my money, and you are right about one thing. You will pay it all back. Catherine slid a stack of papers across the table. This is a confession of fraud and a legally binding repayment agreement, she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. It details every dollar you have stolen, totaling just over $750,000. You will sign it, and you will begin repayments immediately. The terms are non-negotiable. Mark stared at the papers, his hand shaking. And if we do not sign, he whispered. Catherine leaned forward slightly. If you do not sign, she said, her voice dropping to a deadly serious tone, then Mr. Henderson and I will walk out of this room and straight to the district attorney's office. We have a complete file documenting felony grand larceny and wire fraud. You will both be arrested before dinner. The threat hung in the air, heavy and final. There was no escape, no way to talk their way out of it. They were trapped. Becca started to cry, silent tears streaming down her face. Mark just stared at the confession, his face ashen. He looked up at me one last time, his eyes pleading. I met his gaze and felt nothing.
No pity, no lingering affection.
Just a vast, empty coldness. He had killed my love for him, and this was the funeral.
He picked up the pen.
His hand was shaking so badly, he could barely hold it. With a shuddering breath, he signed his name. Then, he pushed the papers over to Becca. She signed hers without even reading it, her tears smudging the ink. It was over. I stood up. Catherine and Mr. Henderson gathered their files. We will be in touch regarding the payment schedule, Catherine said to them, her tone dismissive. I walked to the door, without looking back. As I stepped out into the hallway, I could hear the sound of Becca finally breaking down into loud, hysterical sobs. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel joy. I just felt quiet. The storm that had been raging inside me for weeks had finally passed. All that was left was a calm, clean silence. I had survived. And I was free. The fallout began almost immediately. That evening, my phone rang. It was Mark's mother. I almost did not answer, but I knew I had to face this last piece of the puzzle. I took a deep breath and picked up. Clara, what have you done? She screeched, her voice shrill with panic. Mark just called me. He is a wreck.
How could you do this to him?
To our family. I listened to her tirade without interrupting. She accused me of being cruel, vindictive, and ungrateful. She said I was tearing their family apart over a little bit of money. When she finally paused to take a breath, I spoke, my voice calm and firm. Your son is a thief, I said simply. He and your daughter conspired to steal my entire inheritance. The only reason they're not in jail right now is because I chose to show them a mercy they never would have shown me. You should be grateful for that. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. He would never, she started to say, her voice faltering. I have a recording of him and Becca laughing about it. I cut her off. I have bank records. I have a signed confession. Do not call me again. We have nothing more to discuss. I hung up before she could respond. I blocked her number, and then I blocked Mark's and Becca's. I was cutting the cancer out of my life, one clean incision at a time. The next day, I met Sarah for lunch. I told her everything that had happened in the conference room. She listened, her eyes wide. When I was done, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I am so proud of you, she said, her voice full of emotion. That must have been the hardest thing you have ever done, I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. It was, I admitted. But it was also necessary. We spent the rest of the lunch talking about the future. My future. We talked about me finding a new apartment, about taking a trip somewhere warm, about all the things I could do now that I was free from the weight of Mark and his lies. For the first time in months, I felt a genuine flicker of excitement about what was to come. A few days later, I received a short, formal email from Mark's lawyer confirming the first repayment had been made. Catherine had put a lien on all their known assets. They had been forced to sell their cars and liquidate their investment accounts. The repayment plan was aggressive. It would leave them with barely enough to live on for years to come. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. It was not about the money anymore. It was about the consequences. They had built their lives on a foundation of lies and theft, and now they had to watch it all crumble. My life began to move forward. I broke the lease on the apartment I had shared with Mark. I packed up my belongings, leaving behind everything he had ever given me. Each object felt tainted by his deception. As I packed the last box, I found a framed photo of us from the day we got engaged. He was smiling, and I was looking up at him with so much love and trust in my eyes. I looked at the happy woman in the photo and felt a pang of sadness for her shattered dreams. But I was not that woman anymore. I was stronger. I was wiser. I took the photo out of the frame, tore it into small pieces, and dropped it in the trash. A few weeks after I had moved into my own place, a small, sunny apartment that felt entirely mine, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a cousin of Mark's, someone who had always been kind to me. The text was short. Heard what happened. Just wanted you to know they had to sell the family house to make the payments. Their parents are devastated. Becca's business is ruined. You did the right thing. I stared at the message for a long time. The house they had been so proud of, the one that had been in their family for generations, was gone. Their precious reputation was in tatters. They had lost everything they valued: their money, their status, their home. They had tried to steal my legacy, and in the end, they had lost their own. I never saw or spoke to any of them again. The life I had with Mark felt like a story that had happened to someone else. I focused on my work, reconnected with old friends, and slowly began to heal. The anger and hurt faded, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. I had faced the worst kind of betrayal and had not only survived it, but had emerged stronger on the other side. They thought I was a naive baby, a fool to be played with. They never stopped to consider that the quietest people are often the most observant. They never realized that their arrogance would be their downfall. They finally learned what it feels like to be small, to have everything taken from you. And I learned that my own strength was the one thing no one could ever steal.